Welcome to In Conversation With, a series of discussions with people who hold advanced degrees in the life sciences about their careers and career journeys. My name is Chandrima Majumdar, and I'm a postdoc at the University of California, Berkeley. I'm also a member of the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee.
Hi, and I'm Chris Hine, and I am a professor of medicine at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine, and I am the director of postdoctoral affairs here as well. And I am also a member of the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee. And in this podcast, we are going to have a series of conversations about the vast array of careers available for grad students and postdocs in the life sciences.
So today we're delighted to have with us Dr. Sannie Culbertson. Sannie is the senior editor at the journal Trends in Biochemical Sciences. Sannie, thank you so much for joining us. And could you take a moment to introduce yourself and the things that you do as senior editor?
Well, hi. Thanks, guys, for inviting me to be here. I'm truly honored to be here. First and foremost, let me say I love ASBMB. It's been a part of my graduate career, my postdoc career, as my career as an editor. Indeed, I was just at ASBMB a few months ago for the annual conference. It is one of my favorite conferences to continue to go to interact with the biochemistry community. Before getting into my actual role as a senior editor for Trends in Biochemical Sciences, I first want to set the journal within the landscape at Cell Press. So TIBS, or Trends in Biochemical Sciences, is a review journal at Cell Press. For this audience, other recognizable journals within Cell Press would be Cell, Molecular Cell, Cell Reports, among various others. TIBS itself is one of 16 reviews journals within the Trends portfolio. 15 of these cover the life sciences, and one of the Trends journals extends us into the physical sciences. Reviews at the Trends portfolio do tend to look a little bit different than what I think many people would consider a scientific review. They're not comprehensive. They are not the historical overview going into what is currently known about the field. Instead, they are more concise, more focused on the last literature from the last 3 to 5 years, really trying to put those more recent papers in the context of what has been known and really pointing to the future directions. And a key goal of the reviews that we have at the Trends portfolio is to not just list what has been observed in the literature, but to take all that literature, synthesize it into key take-home messages for readers, and help readers understand the story that is going on in that field so that they understand what's going on, what's happening, and where is the field going. So that's a little bit of a picture about TIBS in Cell Press and what the reviews look like at TIBS and across the Trends portfolio. Now getting into what I do as an editor, well, largely my job is the editorial process. So it's navigating the peer review process. When articles come into the journal, I read through them. I go through with in mind, trying to keep in mind what are the audiences that are going to be most interested in reading this article. And then from there, I work on inviting reviewers who are going to be able to help those audiences best understand that article by providing critical feedback to the authors. And then it's synthesizing that reviewer feedback into a cohesive message for the authors, providing editorial advice on the organization, on the transitions, etc., and really trying to help the authors ultimately work towards sharing as clear and concise a story as possible. And ultimately is working through the revision process and into accepting the manuscripts. I think an interesting thing about being a Trends editor is that we are teams of one. There's 16 journals. There are 16 editors, one editor per journal. So in addition to being the editor, I wear a lot of other hats. I'm the administrator for the journal inbox. I answer everything that comes into the inbox. I am the marketing point person, so I gather and curate and plan all the marketing events for the journal and work with the marketing team to deploy various campaigns. Anything that you might see on the TIBS Blue Sky account is going to come from me behind the scenes, in addition to my professional personal accounts. I am the outreach person for the journal, so I attend conferences, attend workshops, panels, career talks, etc., on behalf of the journal to be able to interact with the community, get to know the community. What are they excited about? What are they looking for? What is needed by the biochemistry community? And we can get into this later, but it's not only about the review content, it's also about the topics that are relevant to the daily scientific life or at the interface of science and society.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I think one of the most exciting hats that I wear is the editor-in-chief hat. So functioning as editors of one for the journal, we are in charge of bringing the content into the journal. So it's analyzing the proposals that come in and also reaching out to authors to write for the journal. And then it's going through various analyses throughout the year to inform on short-term goals, long-term goals, implementing those strategies, and then analyzing all of that down the road once we've had a chance to see those goals be implemented.
So your fingerprints are basically on every single page of every issue, right? So
Every single page, yeah.
So how much of each edition is are people sending things in sort of unprovoked as opposed to you going in with sort of a plan of what each edition is going to look like?
Yeah, so in terms of the content that we publish, it's a monthly journal. Each of the journals contains, on average, 6 reviews and plus some shorter front matter materials. And that's going to be the more scientific life, more of the science and the interface of science and society, more of the more trying to meet the needs of the community rather than the needs of the research field itself.
Mhm.
It does differ across the trends portfolio. Some journals tend to be a lot more tend to receive a lot more proposed ideas. Whereas TIBS, it's increasing, I would say, but about a quarter to a third of the content is coming from proposed ideas, whereas the other 2/3 to 3/4 is content that I am actively reaching out to authors to write on.
Okay.
I see. Yeah, that's a lot of hats that you wear as an editor-in-chief. And I mean, we can go into a lot of different directions, but one question I had is, how do you decide what a theme of a journal is going to be? This is trends in biochemical sciences. How far do you have to keep a tab on what the trends are, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. In terms of keeping tabs on the trends that are ongoing in the scientific field, I feel that there's a few key strategies that I have for trying to inform on what is going on. A lot of it is weekly, paying attention to the online table of contents that are coming out for the journal. So Thursdays are the days that I always dedicate my time to, since most of those e-talks are coming out today at some point. So I have at least a dozen tabs open within
Mhm.
the field of biochemistry, just going through and reading what are the titles, what are the abstracts, where are these people coming from who are writing these, trying to understand what topics that we're seeing with frequency in the literature. And sometimes it informs, when you're looking at where they're from, what topics are more relevant across the world, and trying to make sure that I'm approaching the journal with that in mind, that this is a global scientific community, and making sure that I'm trying to address not only the research that is important to, broad science, but what also is important to certain regions, and making sure that that voice is being heard. So it's keeping an eye on the e-talks. It's keeping an eye on the conferences that are coming up in the coming months, in the coming year. So keeping an eye, I always go through like, what is the breakdown of the topics for the Gordon Research Conferences? Yeah, they have great overall themes, but you can see what the next year, what more specifically that they're looking at. So it's looking at Gordon conferences, the Keystone conferences, the EMBL conferences, just kind of going through the list and seeing, all of a sudden, am I seeing topics that are appearing across all 3 different platforms? That's something to keep an eye on. That's something that the community is really starting to feel traction in, that there's excitement about. Also keeping an eye on social media. What is the community like keeping an eye on? So it's a little bit more anecdotal, but people post articles online. All of a sudden you have this great discussion that goes on. It can inform, say, hey, there might be something here. Let's dig into it a little bit more. Taking all of this into account, I then use keyword searches and various other analyses to see, how many papers are being published on there. Is this field mature enough to be gaining a review on it? Sometimes, there are these emerging topics that are really exciting, and it's just trying to see, okay, are we there? Is this appropriate yet? Or do we need a few more papers to make sure that this is going to be a trajectory that the field is excited to take? And yeah, just kind of seeing trending, what's emerging, kind of keeping an eye on all those different aspects informs on what topics to explore and approach at the journal.
So you said you're a team of one, but I mean, do you have anybody that you work with? Are there people you can sort of bounce ideas off of for the edition, or yeah, how does that happen?
So I meet weekly with my manager. He is another one of the trends editors. And then on top of that, we meet monthly as the trends team. I think most beneficial is that we have teams, Microsoft Teams, where we're able just to like have chats about what we need help on. So within our team, and then within broader Cell Press, if we need to reach out to our colleagues at the primary side, we can enter in any of the questions we have, and immediately you'll get feedback from the rest of the team. And we have team members who have been here for like 20 some years, some who have joined more recently than I have, and a scale of like 2 to 20 years within the trends portfolio. So there's a wide array of expertise. People are specialized in different things, or they find enthusiasm for different things. So there's a lot of really great feedback that we're able to get from the team. So even though we are teams of one working on it by ourselves on a daily basis, the team is there to support each other.
And then does your network expand beyond just the journal? Do you have people sort of out there in the field and academia and industry that are kind of a broader network that you can talk to and ask questions of?
Yeah, so I guess another point to keep in mind when you're thinking about those emerging fields is the advisory board for the journal. The advisory board is professors across the world, from assistant professors all the way up to very senior professors. And when I look at the advisory board, it's trying to make sure that not only are the different geographies being represented, but the different topics are being represented, so that I do have people who are aware of like all the things that are going on in the signaling fields, in the metabolism fields, where like epigenetics, chemical biology. So I do have different touchstones where I can communicate with those advisory board members to be like, okay, what's going on? What's exciting? And they're very communicative, they're very helpful. And it's been wonderful to build relationships with those board members to be able to get that type of feedback and advice.
I see. So what do these communications look like? Do you have meetings regularly? Are they mostly like email correspondence? Like, how do you choose who to talk to and how often do you talk to them?
Most of the email communication, say with the advisory board, is going to be via email. Even with the authors and reviewers, most of it is done via email. There are every once in a while it always stands. I always am very open to meeting via Zoom, via Teams, whatever it is, with any of the authors, with any of the advisory board. I think ASBNB has been great because every time I've gone, more and more, I get to see different board members there. So this last time I was there, I think 3 of the advisory board members for the journal were there that I was able to interact with, one of them meeting for the first time. And it was just a delightful way to get to know the advisory board. And being at conferences, again, ASBNB, it's the biochemistry meeting. So a lot of the people who attend ASBNB have reviewed for the journal, have authored for the journal. And I've always tried to make it a point to seek all those people out, to put faces to names and really work on building those relationships.
So,
Gotcha.
oh, sorry, Shigema, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna ask, so we talked a little bit about like authors and like advisory boards. How do you go about recruiting reviewers? Because I know among postdocs to like be kind of on the like keep a tab on the trends of the field, it's kind of helpful to do peer review, but like a lot of us don't know how to get into that. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so looking at the peer review process, I think one of the key things I do, so we do receive recommendations from the authors about people who are in the field that they think would be good reviewers for their article. That's a great starting point to be able to identify not only the people that they think would be appropriate, but by going to the websites of those people that they recommend, what are the keywords coupled on their websites along with what we find in the paper that makes them think that those are great people to provide feedback, and it can inform on like, how do I search now for people who might have a similar background. It's like, I'm looking for a breadth of people to invite, and it's not limited to a career stage, it's not limited to a geography, in my opinion. We're still looking for the people who are the experts on that field. And sometimes when I reach out to perhaps a more senior researcher, they may say that they are not available, but they point me to somebody in their lab. They point me to somebody who just recently graduated. And those are the people who are often hard to identify. I feel like when looking for early career researchers, postdocs transitioning into the assistant professor realm, it's hard to identify them when there's no website, when there is not like when all I'm seeing on my side is perhaps a name on a paper, perhaps a name on the website. It doesn't help me exactly understand what their expertise is. But as soon as I get a recommendation from like a PI saying, hey, this person's great, I'm like, oh, wonderful. I would love to work with this person on this paper. I also highly encourage in all of my review invitations to have the people I'm inviting work with their lab members to provide that feedback, because I do feel it's valuable, not only for authors to bring in trainees to write reviews with them, but for reviewers to bring in trainees to help them with the review process. It is a great learning experience for all the trainees.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like when you look at it from a reviewer's perspective, it also helps you write your paper in a way that is more compelling. So like all around, I feel like that's a good learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there things that postdocs or early career scientists can do to kind of get on the radar for reviewing?
Yeah, so as Chandrima was asking earlier, is like, do we have databases? So not necessarily at TIBS do I have a database, a formal database where I keep track of people and their expertise, but I do have like a list of when people reach out. I do have a lot of postdocs, a lot of early career professors who do reach out and say, here's my expertise. I would love to review for the journal. So I have kind of a database and keywords if I need people for those specific topics I can look back into that file for. However, then there's other journals within the Cell Press portfolio, like Star Protocols, where you can actually sign up for their volunteer list to volunteer to review. And that is all career stages that they're looking for the peer review process. So that would be a formal database. It's on their website where, in addition to adding names to my list, I do encourage anybody who reaches out to me to volunteer for Star Protocols.
Very good. So later on, we'll ask you a little bit about advice you might have for those that are interested in getting into this. But I'm going to imagine one thing you would say is that you have to like to read. So I kind of want to know how many articles do you read in a month?
In a month. So on a monthly basis, I would say that I tend to have between 25 and like 32-ish, about 30, I would say, articles on average at some point in the review process. So that could be they're new manuscripts, I'm inviting reviewers. They could be out for review, they could be in the revision process. So there's
Yeah.
about 30 review articles per month. But on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, I do go through dozens of e-talks every month, trying to keep on top of the literature. I'm not necessarily reading through all the primary literature. I do read multiple articles a week for the ones that really seem to connect with goals that I have or topics that I feel are timely for the journal that might resonate with the readers of the journal. Those are the ones I will dig into a bit more. But it's dozens of papers that I'm reading every month. And not only is it reading the articles, but I do spend a lot of time with each of those individual review articles. Again, my goal for review articles is to help authors use the feedback that they receive from the reviewers and then from myself to tell a compelling story. So when I get feedback from reviewers, I normally spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours with each manuscript, going through those reviewer feedback, using that to inform me on how to best help the authors modify their manuscript, and then working through that manuscript. So I do inline copy editing for these manuscripts and help authors work on those transitions, make recommendations for maybe some organizational changes. It could be as simple as, okay, maybe let's modify your headers so that you can kind of inform the readers what they're going to get out of this section. It could be telling them, okay, this is a little bit dry. What is the take-home message that you want readers to understand from here? What is the synthesis of the literature? How do we help readers understand this cool story that you're trying to share with them?
Yeah. So how much sort of education or training did you have in writing? Were you always a writer? Because you have to have some basic writing skills to be able to do that, to recognize when things need to be modified and how to modify them, right? So is that just something you sort of figured out on the job, or is that always something that you've worked to develop knowingly or unknowingly?
I maybe unknowingly at first, it was something I was always interested in. I always felt comfortable doing so from a relatively young age. I am very much an avid reader. I think storytelling for me also comes into the picture. I love like fantasy and fiction, so I think there's a storytelling aspect that I feel I'm really drawn to within the review portfolio. But in terms of actually scientific writing, through grad school, through postdocs, I was involved in various committees on newsletters and interviews and all that kind of stuff, just to work on some of the storytelling, some of the scientific writing, scientific communication. But one of the cool things about the career positions within Cell Press, when I was looking at the advertisement for the position for Trends of Biochemical Sciences, we did need to have our scientific background. We needed to have our background in biochemistry. Postdoc position was a plus if we had it. Then the job went on to say, we'll teach you the editorial skills. And so coming into Self Press, I had informally edited papers, grants, etc. for my lab, for other labs, for other students. But I hadn't formally had any of this expertise. So coming in, there was crash courses with other team members, and then I continue to meet weekly with my manager just to be able to work through some of the things. And over the last 6 years, I feel I've really been able to hone my approach to editorial and what is best to focus on when, and trying to help those authors tell the story. And sometimes it might take a few iterations of going through the review process. Sometimes the first review, the first iteration might just be the organization, and then it's getting into the transitions and making the flow as solid as it can be. And maybe sometimes it does take a little bit, but ultimately I feel almost every author that I've worked with really comes away being quite satisfied with the story that they're able to share with readers. That's
Did you take writing classes in school, either whether it's college or even in grad school? Did you do
not writing. Yeah, not writing courses, but oral communication courses is more what I had taken. So at least having an understanding of presentation and how to communicate stories.
Yeah, sure. So you've this is not so much directly about your career, but just a general message to our listeners. You've mentioned the word storytelling now a number of times in this, and
Yeah.
it's a really important aspect even of hardcore science writing. It's something we teach a communications class here, and the first lecture I give is just on telling a story, like fictional stories even, right? Just to get that idea down that even though it's hardcore science and data and facts and figures, there still has to be a story behind it all, right? And bringing that story out is an important part of publishing.
Yeah, when I talk about the classes I've taken, I actually took the ASBMB's science communication course back in grad school. Iowa State also had a wonderful program when I was there to on oral communication. And then this is a topic that I have felt passionate about for the community. And there is a collection that I have gathered on the Trends in Biochemical Sciences website that does include courses that people have implemented at their universities for oral communication, for written communication, for different classroom approaches to be able to help graduate students, postdocs, et cetera, be able to gain those skills. So it's something that I've been really working on, being able to communicate to the community that, hey, there are these resources out there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
it's great to know. So speaking of classes and things like that, like, can you tell us a little bit about your career journey? Like, at what point during your grad school or postdoc did you decide that this is the job you want to do?
Yeah. So, there was a point in grad school, I was enjoying what I was doing, but I was also watching the professors go through the process of trying to obtain grant funding. And this is, 10, 12 years ago. And I was like, oh, this is hard. And that's hard today. But I was like, I don't know that I want that pressure. And so I started to think about different positions that were with that scientific degree and what could be done with it. So at that time in grad school, I had actually started with one of my peers, the graduate learning community within our department. And the goal there was professional development and career exploration. So we were bringing in people to talk about their careers that had biochemistry degrees in their background. And we got to learn about policy, we got to learn about journalism, et cetera. So, it was starting to become aware at grad school that there were really great opportunities that didn't necessarily require being at the bench. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. This is a lot of great information. Proceed forward a few years. My husband and I met while we were in the graduate program, so we're both biochemists. We had to then decide how are we navigating, both of us looking for biochemistry positions. At that time, that was when I was like, oh, I am not feeling the academia position. He was still, I am feeling the academia position. So the ultimate decision for us was to let him take the lead on where he wanted to go for the skill set that he wanted for that academic position. The caveat was it had to be a location where we both could find positions. So we're looking at some of the bigger cities out west, some of the bigger cities out east, and we ultimately ended up in Boston. At that time, I had applied for industry positions. However, a lot of them were looking for postdoc experience. So I did end up applying for a postdoc position, ended up obtaining a postdoc position. We were actually at postdoc positions just down the road from each other at different buildings
That's
on the Harvard Medical campus. And that was great. And I arrived there, I was there doing experiments, things were working, and I was like, still, this is not what I want to do. And that was a clear sign to me that being in the Boston area was such ample opportunity for exploration for careers was to start looking elsewhere. And so I kept a casual eye out for the different opportunities that were happening. And the position for the Trends in Biochemical Sciences editor opened up, and I applied and ended up there. I've been there now for a little bit over 6 years. And it was, I guess, more specifically towards that question was, okay, yeah, I liked science. I didn't necessarily want to be running an academic lab. I didn't need to be at the bench, but how can I still be involved in science? And my passions were science communication, more on the science advocacy side of things that I had gained from doing the graduate career or the graduate learning community and organizing that and being able to help other students find what they were interested in doing. Writing for newsletters, being involved in different affiliations, associations, kind of led me to that point where I was like, okay, science communication is great, storytelling is great. How do I put these pieces together?
Was this something where, all along you had thought, that might be an option someday? Or is this something where, okay, now's the time I got to start thinking about a job. I know I like science communications, maybe an editor position. Like, how did that sort of develop in your mind?
Yeah, so science communication was something that I had really, like I said, been interested in. And it wasn't until that we had heard from a science journalist when we were doing the graduate learning community that I actually understood that that was potentially an option. And it wasn't necessary for me to be writing about the science, but is there another way to be involved in science communication that didn't involve actually being the author of some of the news pieces, et cetera? And for me, that came down to more of the editorial side. And I was looking at more of the copy editing, et cetera, as like a way into the field at that point. But at the same time, I was looking for those type of positions to start making that transition off the bench and into the editorial field. It was that time that the position for the Trends in Biochemical Sciences editor opened up. And it just struck so many chords for me, so many green flags, so much excitement within me that I was like, this is what I want to do. And I am very happy. I feel lucky to be in this position where I am. It's a position where I am excited to go to work every day and be able to interact with the people I work with every day.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about like the actual job application process for becoming an editor? Like, did you have to, review an article during your interview? Like, what was the interview process like? Well, I don't think I know anything about this.
Yeah, so I think it's changed a little bit since I applied. But the initial step when I first went to apply was going through a set of abstracts and titles to see would they be appropriate for the journal and why. So that's an exercise that a lot of our trends editors will also do when they give talks at different schools or when they work with different workshops is just kind of considering, is this within scope for the journal? And so that was one part of it. One part of it was going through part of a manuscript to give some of that copy editing feedback. And then a lot of it was just one-on-one questions about what is the situation, just how do you see yourself in this role? How would you approach these different situations? How would you reach out to people to gain the expertise that you need? So I think a lot of it does come down to the communication skills that you do learn as a student. As a trainee is, especially as a graduate student, you're really learning how to learn. And a lot of that translates to the editorial side of things as well.
Well, yeah, that was what I was wondering as you were giving your answers. Was this a process where you just fell back on the instincts and the things that you learned, or is this something you can sort of cram for that process?
I think the part where it was like trying to actively switch into an editorial mindset was looking at the content that you're receiving and thinking about how it fits into the scope of the journal. But a lot of it does ultimately fall back on learning how to learn. So when I got that prompt, it was like, okay, what is the scope of the journal? So going to the journal webpage and trying to figure out what does the journal consider within scope, going through some of the articles that are there. So it's all the research that you do as a graduate student to figure out, like, how am I going to approach a problem. Sometimes it's falling back in the literature. In this case, it's falling back on the website. So it's doing the research and then using what you found to be able to answer the questions. So it does new questions, but similar way of thinking, in my opinion.
Right, right. Were there particular things you think about either your background or past experiences that made you an attractive candidate to them? Or do you have a sense for why you got the job?
Uh, that's an interesting question. I think some of my
Figure out how to
background.
phrase that without making it sound insulting in any way. No, they pick you.
No, it's all good. No, I think one of the things that I feel that one of the strengths that I brought would have been the background that I had with the graduate learning community and the various organizations that I had been involved in extracurricularly from just the research, showing that I did not only did I have the scientific background, but I was willing and had shown that I was able to reach out to people to put different organization or to put different programming together, to put out different pieces, to work with others. So in doing these extracurriculars outside of the graduate school, and this is something I work with when I do professional development courses, is like, if you're able to demonstrate that you can collaborate with people, that you can communicate with people, that's a
Yeah,
lot of the skills that translate right into the editorial position. And so I think through the different activities that I was involved in, I was able to show the team that I could bring skills. I had skills to bring into the position that would enable me to succeed in the position, I would say.
yeah, no. And it's interesting because I think trainees today sometimes struggle with how much to get involved in things outside of the lab. And sometimes they're even getting pressure from the lab. But, regardless whether you might want to leave the bench or not, even if you want to go the traditional academic route, these experiences and doing these extracurricular things can be really valuable, even for someone who goes into a traditional faculty job. There's so much more that we have to do besides just running the research lab that calls
Mm-hmm.
on some of these other skills. And so I'm always encouraging trainees, don't overdo it, can't get in the way of
Yeah.
your science, but these opportunities can be both rewarding at the moment, but also valuable for your future. And this is a
Yeah.
good example of that.
And I
Yeah.
think also towards that point, within the realm of like still being in your, like, directly tied to your scientific
Yeah.
research that they're doing, is the point of communication, especially, is, are they communicating with their lab members in group meeting? Are they communicating with their department in, say, a seminar setting? Are they communicating with collaborators, and maybe even translating their science for their friends and family who are outside the scientific field? That's all directly tied to the work that they're doing in lab. It doesn't have to necessarily be considered an extracurricular, but all those communication skills of being able to talk to the
Right.
specialist audience, the broad scientific audience, the social, the public audience, all those are very, very valuable skills to going into an editorial position.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned you like really enjoy your job. What is your favorite aspect of your job?
There is flexibility, which is a wonderful aspect to it. I have two littles at home, so it is nice to be able to have a position where I am working from home on a daily basis. Definitely, we have our structured meetings, but I think there is joy in being able to do the job on a little bit more of a flexible timeline that makes me so enthusiastic to come to it. I'm still able to do the things that I need to get done on a personal level. And that, I think, really enables me to put my energy and my attention into the journal when I am at when I'm at my desk. The team, I have never worked with a more supportive team than the Trends team and the broader Cell Press team, which is absolutely wonderful. Like I said, it's not only the Trends team, it's working with the primary editors. I do attend journal clubs with the primary side of things, and just being able to support and be supported by and to support them through different collaborations that we have across the Cell Press portfolio is really wonderful. I get to interact with people from around the world on a daily basis as well, which is something I did not experience as a graduate student or as a postdoc. So on a daily basis, I am getting emails in from all over the world, and I am responding to emails and talking with people from all over the world, which is delightful.
Yeah. When you were describing your job earlier, I was trying to imagine what the structure of your day might be like. I mean, there are the hard deadlines of, okay, we got to get this month's edition done, and these are the things I need to do. But then, as you described, there's just all the constantly assessing the world out there and figuring out what might make a future article. So this is not a 9 to 5 job, is it? I mean, how do you sort of force a schedule onto your day, I guess?
Yeah, so I would say I have more of a structured week that I do rather than a day to day. Day to day tasks definitely change depending on what content is in house and how much content is in house. But I would say most of my Monday through Wednesdays is hardcore editorial. It is inviting reviewers, revising manuscripts, going through revisions, accepting manuscripts. And that's not to say that I don't do that on Thursdays and Fridays as well, but generally I try to really emphasize that as being the first part of my work week. Thursdays, like I mentioned earlier, is the day that all of the online table of contents come out. So it's a day that I spend a lot of my time commissioning and working through the proposals that have come in. I'm inviting authors to write for the journal since it is such a big part of maintaining the status of the journal, to maintaining the content volume at the journal. And then Fridays is a little bit more, I like to say, my flex day. It's my creative day where I do get to wear the editor in chief hat and think about, okay, what are the goals of the journal? How am I going to be able to help the journal achieve those goals? And so going through different analyses, reaching out to various members to receive feedback on how to implement some of these goals. So it's kind of more of a structured week rather than a day to day.
Yeah.
Is there an aspect of the job that like people just do not associate with an editor role that you kind of like found by surprise after starting it?
Maybe the administrative and the marketing side of it, it's a little bit. So some of the bigger teams, they will have administrative people who are answering all the emails that come into the journal. That is something that we do on a daily basis. I spend a good chunk of my time every morning going through and answering all the inquiries that come into the inbox. But the marketing is a lot of fun. I'm the marketing liaison for the trends team with the Cell Press marketing team as well. So it's really trying to think about what tools we have available and how do we bring visibility to the trends portfolio. So that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of behind the scenes work. But yeah, I don't think many people. So when you're an editor, I don't know that they necessarily
Yeah,
associate you with being the marketing person for the journal.
Right.
yeah, that's very true. Is there any aspect of the job that's not your favorite?
Mm, so I guess one part about transitioning off the bench and even transitioning from not necessarily transitioning, but going into the review side rather than the primary side is that there is sometimes that desire to be there where you're the one who knows something. You're the one who found something. You're the one who's reading something brand new. Reviews, it's a little bit more retrospective. So there is a little bit of that loss of like, I'm sitting on something that nobody has seen before. That was a little bit of a transition to get over, but I think right now that's been replaced by authors being so excited about the work that they're doing and wanting to share that story and helping them
Hmm.
to share that story. So it's a little bit after the fact that they found something really cool, but it is still helping them to tell that really cool story.
So
That's
you
very,
touched on some of the things that in your background that led you to where you are, but for trainees out there that think this sounds interesting, are there sort of some practical pieces of advice that you might give for moving in this direction?
I would say communicate as often as you're able to. Work on those communication skills, whether it is oral communication skills, whether it's written communication skills. Just being able to communicate science is a huge part of what we do as editors. It's not only talking, it's not only the articles, but it's working with the authors, it's working with the reviewers, it's working with all the different parties to make sure that everybody feels seen, feels supported, and ultimately, like I've said many times, is working towards that final story. I think science communication is always something I would say. Most of the students who are gonna go through grad school, I would say, have skills to be successful in an editorial position. They are balancing experiments, they're balancing classwork, they're balancing their personal life. They have time management skills. That is critical when it comes to wearing so many hats. they have potentially collaborations with other people. That's not necessarily only giving them their communication skills, but it's giving them that ability to work with multiple different people and multiple different viewpoints on how to approach a problem, and being able to work through the different viewpoints is also a key thing to being an editor, because you're working with not only the authors but reviewers who are thinking that they should approach it a little bit differently, the authors who want to approach it one way. So it's kind of trying to meet in the middle, and I think a lot of collaboration does work that way. So yeah, those would be skills
That's great to
emphasize
know.
working on.
Yeah, so like as we kind of wind down, come to the end, one thing I like to ask all of our guests is if you had a way to meet your younger self, and maybe when she was finishing up undergrad or grad school, what would you tell her about like how her career would turn out?
I would say it is okay to be scared. It is okay to be scared in making that transition. But if that transition really resonates with you, then it's worth that risk. That that I should go for it, that they should go for it.
That's
Yep,
lovely.
absolutely. Well, Sannie, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you for spending some time and telling us about this career. For listeners who want to continue the conversation or have any questions for us or for our guest today, you can join us on our ASBMB active site thread where you can post any comments or questions. So thank you again. Nice to see everybody. Till next time. Bye. Okay.